Shalom, I am Dr. Ann Davis, and I am having fun taking you on these virtual visits to Israel. This one is going to be to Jerusalem. If this is your first visit to Jerusalem, albeit virtually, I trust you will be as excited as I was when I first approached the City of God many years ago. I have been there numerous times since, and each trip has been a thrilling experience. If you have already been to the Holy City, then I hope you will enjoy this virtual tour as you join me on this grand adventure. So we're going to leave from JFK Airport in New York. You can also go from Atlanta. We're going to take El Al Airlines, and you might want to know what El Al means. It means to what is higher than. El is to in a direction to. Al, what is higher than? Higher than is the land of Israel. We land at Ben Gurion Airport in Israel, and I go out onto the street, and these are share taxis. This one you see is to Tel Aviv. We have to just walk down the street a little bit and find one that says Yerushalayim, and they'll wait until the seats are full, and then they'll leave. So we're on our way to Jerusalem. I want to share with you some of the things on the drive from Ben Gurion Airport to Jerusalem. This is the hill country. The airport is down on the coastal plain, and you have to come up into the hill country. Jerusalem is up on the high point of the hill country. It's not high as far as I'm concerned because I live in New Mexico and our mountains are much higher, but it's called the hill country. And you see the road going up toward Jerusalem. The picture is being taken from not from Jerusalem, but from that area of Jerusalem. Now, I have up here the War for Independence in 1949 because today, if you go to Jerusalem, they've built a new highway, so you don't take this road. When I was doing it, most of my trips, I went up through this road, and I could recreate in my mind what happened during that War for Independence. The United Nations had declared Israel to be an independent state, and then Jordan got the rest of the British Palestine, which was a lot more than Israel got, but those were the breaks. And war broke out because the surrounding Arab countries refused to accept Israel as a state. And that's called the War for Independence because they had to fight very, very hard against Egypt, Syria, Jordan, all these Arab countries. Jerusalem, there was a group of Jews that was a holdout in Jerusalem, but the Arabs controlled all around. So the Jews had to bring food and supplies to this little holdout in Jerusalem, and they had to go up this road. They called it Suicide Alley because there are cliffs above, and the Arabs were on the cliffs above, and they would be shooting down. They kept one of the jeeps that had made it through. I think it had been damaged, going up through Suicide Alley in that War for Independence in 1949. Eventually, the Jews had to give up, and the women and children were allowed to go, and the older men, but the Jordanians picked out those that they thought were young enough to be soldiers, and they took them, and they were never heard from again. So we're approaching Jerusalem, and it's a walled city. These walls were erected actually by Arabs after quite a bit after the destruction by the Romans. The share taxi can't go into the city. It lets you off close. This is the Jaffa gate, and so we're going to have to walk in, and hopefully your suitcase has rollers on it, and we'll pull our suitcases with us. We'll go here through the gate, and we'll enter into a fairly wide plaza. And there's a lot of activity in this plaza, but we're going to walk through the plaza, and on the other end of the plaza, we're going to come to what's called King David Street. And that's going to take us down, and on both sides there's just vendors. And most of the vendors are Arab vendors, and they've got wonderful things for you to buy. But we're not going to stop and buy anything. We're going to come down King David Street, not very far until we turn off to the right. There's a little jog to the right, and that takes us to a parallel street that is going to take us to our hotel. Now, the hotel where I like to stay is the Lutheran Guest House. It's in the old city. A Lutheran minister who was on our board for a number of years, and he always gets permission for me to stay at the Lutheran Guest House. I just love it. This is the common area. And the rooms are immaculately clean. And you're right in the heart of the old city. And the most wonderful part of it is Terrace Garden of the Lutheran Guest House. So here we're going to go out under the archway, and we come out to this terrace. It's just wonderful. I've spent a lot of time out there. I do work out there. I do research out there. This is where I discovered in Galatians what it meant to be allegorically speaking. This really got me going on my ability to penetrate the depth of Scripture. At the time, I was learning to speak Hebrew, actually. It was back in the late 90s when the Russians were flooding in from the former Soviet Union, and I was in with them in an ulpan where we were all learning how to speak Hebrew. Now, I was not interested in speaking. I mean, I had to learn to do some speaking, but my main goal was to be able to read the Scriptures in Hebrew. And during a break, it was 1 month and then a break and then the other month. And during the break, I came up here to Jerusalem. I had enough Hebrew that I could, get into the bus and tell the bus driver where I was going. And it was funny because when I was on the bus, all of a sudden, the telephone rang. This was back in the late 90s. And I looked around. I said, what is going on? And I would think about 2/3 of the people on the bus picked up their cell phones to see if it was theirs. Well, I didn't even know about cell phones at that point. And that was my introduction to cell phones. And everybody in Israel had them, and in the United States, people were just starting to get them. So this is where I'm going to have you stay, in the Lutheran Guest House, which is right in the heart of the old city. I'm going to give you a little schematic here of the old city. We came in the Jaffa Gate, and there was that big plaza, and then we went down King David Street, but then we took that little jog to the right until we got to the Lutheran Guest House. Now there's another gate, and if the Lutheran Guest House is full, if I can't stay there, I will stay at the Notre Dame Hotel, which is outside the old city, but just across the street from another gate. Notre Dame is run by the Catholics. It's a very wonderful place to stay. By the way, in all of these guest houses, you get your breakfast, and what I do is it's a buffet style. So I put together bread and cheese and meat and some fruit and everything, and I bring baggies with me so that's going to be my lunch, and then I buy my dinner. So what we're going to do here is the brown is the Christian quarter. So if we come in from the Notre Dame Hotel, we're in the Christian quarter, and the heart of the Christian quarter is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. But then there are other quarters too that you want to know. The Arab quarter is the largest one, and that's where most of the vendors are, in the Arab quarter. And it's safe to go into the Arab quarter. The Israeli army controls throughout the whole city, and it's very safe. So now we're going to continue down King David Street, and then we're going to take the road that takes us through the Arab quarter to the Damascus Gate. And along there's just going to be wonderful, wonderful vendors and restaurants and places. It's just a great place to go. Armenian quarter is fairly small. There's not a lot in the Armenian quarter, not a lot of shops and things, but there's a restaurant that is one of my favorite restaurants. And when I'm staying in a Lutheran guest house, I can easily walk through some alleys and get over to my wonderful Armenian restaurant. But of course there are restaurants that are in the Arab quarter, and there are some in the Christian quarter as well. Now we're going to go to the Jewish quarter. That's in brown, and it's very easy to get to from our hotel. So that's sort of an overview of the city. There's one more thing I want to point out to you, and that's the Temple Mount. There's a square in the Jewish quarter, and that's where you can get to the Temple Mount from there. I don't know whether it's available to get up to the Temple Mount now. I went up a number of years ago when it's never easy to go. I was alone. I went up by myself alone, And I think I went up from the Arab quarter, which is unusual. Most people come up from the Jewish quarter. So I was up there by myself, and I had been staying at the Old Pond learning Hebrew, and there were some girls from the Palestinian area that I got to know, and they helped me learn some Arab phrases, so I could say hello and goodbye and thank you and things like that. I didn't know much. So I was up on the Temple Mount, and some three Palestinian soldiers came over with guns, looking very, very hostile. And I think the Holy Spirit just told me what to say. I said, "Oh, are you Israeli soldiers?" Knowing that they weren't. And one of them was the head guy, and he looked very embarrassed. And he told his other two in Arabic to leave me alone. So I went over to the mosque on the Dome of the Rock, and there were two Arab girls, and I said hello to them in Arabic, but they spoke English. So I asked them, what do I do? And they said, here, take your shoes off here, and then you can enter. And they didn't enter with me. They were kind of nervous to be with me, but they told me what to do. So I took my shoes off, left them there, hoping they would be there when I came out. And I went into the Dome of the Rock, and it was just incredible. I just had heard Lene Rittmeyer talk about the rock and where the scroll of the Torah would have been. It was pretty exciting for me to go. Anyway, I'm going to leave the schematic now, and we're going to go into the Jewish quarter. The Jewish quarter, people live in the Jewish quarter. It's not really a merchandise full of stores. There are a couple of stores in there, but for most part, it's residential. And there are these small little streets. There's also a big square in the middle. People will gather. They'll have some coffee. They'll chat. The kids will be playing. Because this is where they live, and this is where their home is. And here the men, play. I don't know what they're playing, but anyway, they're having a good time playing, very serious playing. Now, I want to spend a little time on this. In 1945, this was during the War for Independence, and that little Jewish holdout in the old city, in the Jewish quarter, they finally had to give up. The Jordanian army came in, and they completely destroyed the Jewish quarter. It was just anger. It was anger. This is our land. We don't want you people to be here. The United Nations, we don't agree with what they've done. We want to push you out. This is our land. It's ours. And they destroyed the Jewish quarter. The blessing was that when the Jews came in after they won the War for Independence, the archaeologists were able to excavate the Jewish quarter. They learned so much about certainly the time of Jesus, and even way before that as well. The Vol Archeology Museum is in the Jewish quarter, and the archaeologists have excavated that area of the Jewish quarter, and it's remained as a museum. So you can go in, and they'll explain to you, and little plaques will explain that these were the houses of the wealthy scribes, the Sadducees and scribes, and it was on a high point, and then you walk down to the wall of the Temple Mount. So going through the Vol Archeology Museum is really a wonderful experience, and there are just a lot of things there, and they explain it all so that you have a sense of being there before the destruction by the Romans. So the Cardo was the Roman marketplace, and these are the Roman stones for the street and the pillars. Now let me show you a picture of this is what it would have looked like. You can see those pillars on the side, and now there's a roof over it, but there wasn't. It was open at the time of the Romans, and under the portico on both sides would have been vendors selling their wares. And so you this part of the Cardo, you walk and you just picture what it was like at the time of Yeshua and the Romans. when you walk through that opening, you're it's roofed over with arches, and it's filled with Jewish vendors. But the fun part is before you go into the Jewish vendors. This is the Western Wall, also called the Wailing Wall. And I want to point something out to you here. I've put a red line to show you that when the Jews came in after they won the War for Independence in 1949, over the centuries, dirt had piled up to that red line. And so, over the time, Israel has come in and they have dug down to the original Roman tile plaza area. The little stones on the top is where the Romans had pushed these huge granite rocks down. They had pushed them down. And when the Arabs came in, they rebuilt that area, but not with the big stones, but with small stones. They built it back up again with those small stones. So what you see are the huge granite rocks from the time of King Herod, who rebuilt and refortified the Temple Mount, and then the little stones on the top that the Arabs had done. But the red line shows you what the Jewish soldiers would have seen when they came in. Everything below the red line was dirt. But now Israel has exposed that plaza, and you can go into this wall. It's called the Wailing Wall because Jews will come and they will pray for the return of the temple area to them. Right now it's under Palestinian control. The Western Wall, the Wailing Wall, is divided into two parts. 2/3 is for the men, 1/3 is for the women. And this is the women's area, which I was allowed to go to. I was there once with my husband, and he went into the men's area and took a lot of pictures in the men's area. He's a photographer, so I got a lot of his pictures that I use in my teachings. Let's see, if you go around the corner, from the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall, you'll come to an area that's been excavated. When I first started going to Israel, it had not been excavated, and then on one of my trips, it was partially excavated, and then I went again, and it was fully excavated, and it's really very exciting. These were the steps to the triple doors where the common people would have gone up and through those doors underneath the Temple Mount and emerging up onto the surface of the Temple Mount. So when you climb those stairs, this picture I took when they were still pretty crumbly. Since then, they've really fixed one part of them and put a railing, so you go up on very safe steps. And you're walking up the area that Yeshua would have walked to get up under and into the Temple Mount. Right here is the double gate. It is, you can only see a tiny little bit of it, but what we're looking at here today is where they've reinforced the steps so that you can go up to the steps, and there's the triple gate. Now the triple gate has been blocked off. The Palestinians are in charge of the Temple Mount, and they do not want anybody coming up onto the Temple Mount. So they've blocked off these gates. Now, one thing you have to do when you go to Jerusalem is to walk through Hezekiahs Tunnel. It's not always possible because the water is coming from the Gihon spring outside the city walls. And the spring, the Jews of ancient Israel thought it had magical, spiritual properties, because there was times when the water would really rise up and gush, and then it would recede. So it would rise up and be gushing maybe for a period of a week or 2 weeks, and then it would recede. So you can only walk through when it doesn't recede completely, but it recedes enough that you can walk through. You have to have, old tennis shoes, because the rock there is kind of sharp in places, and it's a narrow tunnel, and it's just this was Hezekiah, the enemies were approaching, and he had to the Gihon spring was their source of water, so he had to bring that in, and then he covered the Gihon spring to hide it, so that the Assyrians would not know, they couldn't pollute the water to the city. And then the water was flowing into the city at the time the Assyrians were attacking. When I first was going to Israel, and when I first walked through Hezekiahs Tunnel, I was told that this was the pool of Siloam. Since then, archaeologists have actually discovered it. It's much broader, and this is where Yeshua healed the man born blind. And the water from the Gihon spring, would flow higher and then lower. It was felt to be a sort of a magic place, and this is where Yeshua, the actual place where he healed the man born blind. Now let's walk through the Arab quarter. You simply have to do it, and you're going to end up buying things to bring home for yourself and for your friends and your family. There's just a lot there. You can negotiate. Don't just take although they're going to look at you and, what are you doing trying to negotiate, blah, 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 blah. But you smile and you say, well, let me keep looking and maybe the price will come down. Here's a gentleman who's, it's a restaurant. I had stopped to eat at the restaurant, and he was very proud to show, the dish that he was bringing over. I think I was with my husband at that time. And there's just wonderful, wonderful Arab food. Of course, I like my Armenian food, but you can't beat the Arab food. You really can't. Here I'm walking through. As you get closer to the Damascus Gate, there'll be more Palestinians, because they come in for to shop. They come in and shop here. They live outside. Well, there are Palestinians living in the Arab quarter. There's a lot of residents there, but a lot of them live outside in the Arab area outside the Damascus Gate. Now, the Christian quarter is very interesting. I was was staying at the Ulpan, and there was a girl here from Canada, and she and I came together to Jerusalem. And then I had been invited by the two Arab girls, Palestinian girls that I had met at the Ulpan, to come to visit them. They lived in Nablus, which was in the north part of the Palestinian area. I was very nervous about going by myself, so I asked this girl from Canada if she would come with me. We came first to Jerusalem, and here we are. These steps have been excavated, and this would have been the way that Yeshua would have entered into Jerusalem. So that's pretty exciting. But of course, when you go into the Christian quarter, you have to. Here are the original Roman road. It's not a wide road; it was a narrow way into the city. But these are stones that the Romans. So you're walking on the Roman way in the city of Jerusalem. But of course, when you're in the Christian quarter, you have to walk along the Via Dolorosa, which means the sorrowful way. This is where Yeshua carried the cross outside of the city to the hill where he was going to be crucified. These are some Palestinian Christians, not Palestinian, Filipino Christians. And they're walking along the Via Dolorosa, reenacting that time when Jesus was carrying the cross to his death. And now we're continuing on the Via Dolorosa. This is all in the city of Jerusalem. Now, of course, we have to go to the Church of the Holy Sepulcher. This is the plaza outside, and you enter into the church, and it's just an incredible experience to be in the Church of the Holy Sepulcher. The fun part, the Church of the Holy Sepulcher they're divided into certain parts, and different Christian sects have control over those parts. One of them is up on the roof, and those are the Coptics. They're the Egyptians, the Egyptian Christians, the Coptics, and they control the roof. And they have built, places on the roof where they can live and worship, and that's up on the roof. And here are some of the Coptic Christians up on the roof. It's really fun to go in the Church of the Holy Sepulcher. Now, we are going to leave through the Zion Gate. And what makes this really important is all the bullet holes that you see surrounding the gate. In the War for Independence, when the people of Israel, when the Jewish army finally entered the old city, they did it through the Zion Gate. It must have been a horrendous thing, because the Zion Gate does not go straight in, it jogs to the right, a right angle to the right. And they had to fight their way in, and these bullet holes were all from that storming of the old city through the Zion Gate by the army which became Israel, the Israeli army. This is a very famous picture. In 1967, when they won the War for Independence, these Israeli soldiers were among those who had come in through the Zion Gate. And the first thing they did after securing the city, of course, was to go to the Western Wall in order to pray. And here they are at the Western Wall, looking up at the Western Wall. Look at the expression. I mean, I'm choking. The expressions on their faces, because after, centuries, the Jews finally were allowed to go back into the Promised Land, but they were denied Jerusalem. And it took a war for them to come in, and finally Jerusalem became theirs. It was divided, by the way, at the end of the war. Part of it was given to the Palestinians, part of it was given to the Israelis. I think it was 1972, they took over all of the old city and have had control of the old city ever since, although they freely gave the Temple Mount to the Palestinians. No one knows quite why, but they did. And so they have the plaza by the Western Wall, and the Palestinians have the top of the Temple Mount. So I hope you have enjoyed this visit to Jerusalem, and I'll be back with more visits for you. With this, I wish you shalom and happy trip to Jerusalem.